Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We talk everything animation here, including Rick and Morty, which we'll be getting into today. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by John McKenna.
Hi, everybody.
Brit Griffin.
Hi.
Carlton Smith.
Hello.
And Andy Potter.
Hey there.
Welcome to the Rick and Morty off-season overly animated coverage. It is now the eternal Rick and Morty off-season once again. We're here for unspecified amount of time, says Mr. Poopy Butthole, to wait until season 4 of Rick and Morty. But our podcast will not be stopping. We will have a semi-weekly Rick and Morty podcast still for a little bit. So stick with us for the Rick and Morty off-season. Today, our first off-season podcast will be ranking the season 3 episodes. 10 to 1 will be going down our consensus ranks of the season 3 Rick and Morty episodes. More on that in a second. But to make sure you don't miss any of our off-season podcasts, subscribe to us on iTunes. Search for Overly Animated Rick and Morty. That we have a Rick and Morty specific feed. Or if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to us there. We will be having more Rick and Morty content. So if you're subscribed, you don't have to worry about missing any of that. So, what we're doing here is the second time we've done this on this podcast. I've created rather than have everyone give their individual episode rankings for the season 3 episodes, I've polled everyone who's been on a Rick and Morty podcast for this season in Overly Animated, plus Carlton, who's newly joining us here, and we'll get his take soon. And I've averaged out our rankings. So people gave us 10 to 1, so it's not grading each episode. We're just ranking them like on numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then it's pretty simple. I just gave 10 points to people's first place choice, 9 the second, ... 1 to last. So I'll give you the average ranking of the episode, and then we'll see who had it high, who had it low. People will defend themselves. People will say why they had it in this place, and we will see how it compares to your lists. And you can let us know after the podcast. Okay, so before we get into this, I already have everyone's rankings. So, and I should say, I know our consensus rankings. Our co-hosts here do not. So we will see their reactions as we go down the list. But they have already submitted their rankings, and I want to let's get some takes before we get in. John, let's start with you. What do you think stood out to you when compiling these rankings of the season 3 episodes? Was it clear which were the standout episodes, the not so great episodes? Were they all kind of similar to you?
For me, it was quite easy to get at least the top 4. Throughout the whole season, and just doing these panels, when we start talking about them, we start reviewing them, it was a quality season straight through, but there were just those episodes that you're going to be thinking about, as long as this hiatus goes on, you're going to be thinking about those episodes, revisiting them, constantly watching them, just you want to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into them, and I have a feeling that those are going to be in the top bracket for everyone else as well. And for the bottom 3, again, and the bottom 3, same thing, they're just those that are, while still good, they were just forgettable. They didn't have interesting elements or plot threads to them, and the characterizations weren't as sharp as they were elsewhere. So the tough part for me was sort of the middle, that middle area that didn't quite make the top, didn't quite make the bottom, that had some great moments, but just didn't have enough of them. That was sort of the tough 3 or 4. But for me, at least, it got kind of easy to sort of block them together and adjust them as necessary. So, yeah, there were definitely standouts for sure on the good and the bad side.
Okay, yeah. So you had tops and bottoms. Britt, what about you? Was it an easy process to rank these episodes for you? And were there ones that stood out as best and worst?
There were ones that stood out best and worst, but the problem is a lot of the episodes would have one plot that I liked or a couple of scenes that I really, really liked, and then maybe I would not really care about the rest of the episode. Like Pickle Rick, the scenes with the therapist. Ooh. I love therapist talk. Let's talk about some psychology. Those are great. Let's do some psychoanalysis. That's right up my alley. Pickle Rick fighting as a rat. No. I rewatched the episode and I literally was I don't have time. I literally do not have the patience to watch these scenes. Like watching an action movie. During the fight scenes, I take a nap.
Yeah. Yeah, and some episodes may be the A plot, but not the B plot, what you're getting into. Yeah.
ABC's of Beth, I liked Beth's plot, but the plot with Jerry could have not ever existed.
Okay, so yeah, you've identified Pickle Rick, ABC's of Beth. Carlton, do you agree with those choices as maybe difficult ones to rank, and any others you had trouble placing in specifically high or low on the list?
Yeah, so I think my top three were easy picks for me, but everything from 5 below took a lot more time to figure out, just because there were a lot of elements I really liked, but there were some that I just couldn't fully get invested in, or some that I felt were almost out of left field. So when I was picking my last, or like my bottom tier, I really had to think about that. Like the first three I knew off the top of my head. The last three on my personal list were pretty much interchangeable. I think I just had to fill in the last three slots, but for me, they were pretty much interchangeable about where they fell.
Okay. And yeah, Andy, generally agree with everyone?
Yeah, I think it was pretty easy. There were a couple of kind of hard, like maybe 2 and 3 could be swapped or 9 and 10 could be swapped. But I think the general list I had was just, I had it off the top of my head and I was like, yeah, this is pretty accurate to what I think is right.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, the middle is pretty interchangeable, and then I had my tops and bottoms episodes. But as I have these ranks in front of me, we definitely do not agree on what the bottom episodes were. So I think the most interesting part of going down this list is going to be the what our lowest ranked episodes are. Actually, I think the top is pretty standard, but there's going to be some controversial rankings early on here. So I want to get right into this, and then maybe at the end we can kind of evaluate what our rankings say about season 3 as a whole. I was going to ask that now, but I want to get right into the ranking here. So let's right off the bat. I think this is maybe our biggest discussion point is our 10th ranked episode. So I'm going to go 10 to 1. Number 10 on our list, last place, is Vindicators 3: The Return of World Ender.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I am not even remotely
Sounds right.
surprised.
Right. So this is there's a few people that had this in last place, including John on his list had it in last. April had it highest in 5th place. Me and Andy had it second highest in 7th place on our list. This is a hot topic of debate all season. I recently got an email.
Where do I have mine?
You were second to last for you, and a few people as well. I got an email saying you guys are way too hard on Vindicators 3. It's one of the best episodes of the show. So people feel there's a lot of differing opinions on this. I have the standard deviation for our rankings too. It wasn't as high. This isn't the highest standard deviation episode, but I want to get the takes on why some of you had this so low. John, you had this last place. What's up with that?
It was definitely one of those. It was a bottom 3 for me. It was just a matter of which one am I going to put in the lowest ranking. We'll go through the others pretty soon, I'm quite sure. But I just had it last because for me it was the most formulaic of the Rick and Morty episodes. It was go to room 1, go to room 2, go to room 3, do task, do task, do task. Morty get upset, Morty get upset, Morty get upset. Surprise ending, random rap scene, done. It felt just like it was going through the motions. It wasn't very deep. The characters, the Vindicators were fine, but it's like I remembered like one, which was Ant-Man. So, and I think that was Ant-Man, but that was
1 million ants.
1 million ants.
Yeah, 1 million ants. You see, the fact I forgot.
How could you forget 1 million? Oh my god,
He is the best.
Yeah,
He was a million times better.
than Ant-Man. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Interesting.
yeah, but I don't know. It was the least Rick. It was the least Rick and Morty episode for a show that loves to bounce around. It was too linear, not that interesting. Yeah, Rick gets evil. Cool, whatever. It just it's not something. It wasn't something I think I could grab onto. It didn't advance characters at all that much, so that's why I had to put it at the bottom.
Okay, that's pretty decent support there, being a pretty formulaic, conventional episode. Carlton, it seems like you mostly agree having this at second to last on your list.
Yeah, so what pushed this up from the dead last was the fact they brought in logic at the very end, which I didn't expect.
They brought in logic, of course.
But what I've really found interesting, and this is why it was so far down on my list, is just it felt like early Rick and Morty to me. It felt like something that I would have expected maybe out of the first season or two. It didn't feel like it really belonged in the set of season 3 episodes. I love superhero movies. I'm a big fan of the Marvel and DC universe, so I thought I would have this higher, but when I just started making my placements, it just fell further and further down my list.
Okay, fell as you were ranking. Andy, give you and me were highest on this of the group. Give the Vindicators defense.
I think you guys are all wrong because there are episodes of this season.
Okay, thank you. You already have a good answer when you started off with you guys are all wrong. I really like that. Okay, continue.
Yeah, there are episodes that are worse than this. And what I'm saying is that this is a safe episode of Rick and Morty. There's not a lot of really crazy stuff going on, like you guys said, but there are episodes of the season that have very large, glaring flaws, which I think is a lot worse than just being a safe episode that I found actually funny. Like, this episode still has a lot of really funny jokes, it has logic at the end, it has noob. This episode is just, I sat down and enjoyed it. And it's not the best episode of this show. It definitely isn't. But there are episodes of this season that just legitimately do things that are just bad or just not interesting or entertaining. And that's
this show. I didn't think this episode was entertaining, and I thought it did a lot of stuff that was bad.
Yeah, so so Britt, you're closer to the John side on this?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I heavily agree with Andy here. We have a few groups. Look, I didn't have this. I contributed to this being last because I didn't put it higher than 7th. But I think this is very much not a bottom tier episode of the season. And the main thing, as I keep saying, this episode is really funny. I think this is a top 3 funny episode of the season. And I think that, yes, that's not like why we're watching the show, maybe number 1 reason, although it's a pretty big reason. Like maybe we tend to appreciate the, like really interesting, just like intellectual elements or narrative elements of it. But, like that's just such a big factor to me. This episode is so many quotable lines, memorable side characters. Like I'm really unhappy at this being 10, to be honest, but I do think this is indicative of, a lot of people's opinions. Like I think a lot of people are agreeing with this being last. And I don't really understand. I think we'll get into some of these next episodes that I think should be lower. So we'll see. Maybe we'll compare them as we go up. But yeah, that's
I think the reason people don't like it so much is that ultimately it's just kind of pointless. We don't learn anything. We don't gain anything.
Yeah, I think that's...
None of the characters learn anything. All the other characters are kind of throwaway. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, I think there's a version of the season where this episode is like important, where Morty goes somewhere with his fed upness with Rick. This is like a key moment in Morty's characterization, but we certainly didn't get that. So I do agree that it's got a pretty conventional narrative structure, and it doesn't really do anything to the season as a whole. But I would place that blame on other episodes, which we'll get into soon. So let's get to our number 9 here. And I will say we had looking at the total points, we have a bottom 4 episodes basically comprising our lower tier. So only 4 points higher, which is not a lot when we're summing up everyone's scores. Number 9, second to last on our list, is Morty's Mind Blowers. This was, we had a few differing rankings here. This was last place on a lot of people's lists, including mine, Andy's, and Britt's. Carlton and John were more forgiving at 7th and 8th on their list. So I think that we are flipping here from the sides that were just taken before, with, I guess, Britt switching sides. So John, you have this highest of the bunch. What's the defense for Morty's Mind Blowers?
Okay, well, you knew Morty's Mind Blower was going to be the interdimensional cable episode in a sense for this season. It was meant to be the breather in between. But unlike interdimensional cable, this allowed the writers to kind of showcase, 2-minute bursts of their own creativity, and which I actually liked. I liked the vignette story arc. I liked how they were able to make, all these compelling stories in just like 1-2-minute intervals and tie it all together as in an episode where it becomes a case of you learn that Rick represses certain Morty memories both on request and without request, that you see Rick does have some flaws in his character, even both the fact he can't ski, the fact he hates losing to Morty in checkers. And some of those vignettes were really funny. You had the perfectly level floor. My favorite was Morty using the super magnets to grab all those redheads. The fact he thought he was torching an alien, he was actually jerking it off. They were all very, very funny, short little bursts. It was just at that point in the season, for me at least, we had all those very heavy episodes. It was nice just to take a nice relaxing breath and just enjoy something. It's not a top episode because, again, it didn't advance. It was just jokes. It didn't advance anything, similar to Vindicators 3. But unlike Vindicators 3, it actually works in the fact that there wasn't all that heavy of a plot. So that's why I had to put it. That's why I put it higher.
Okay, that's interesting. Carlton, you also had you were 8th on this episode. Do you agree more with John on this?
Yeah, and this one also just edged out Vindicators for me on my list. But I really did enjoy getting to see all of the different writers and their different ideas and the different story directions. It was very interesting and a nice departure from just having Justin improvise throughout Interdimensional Cable as we've seen in the past 2 seasons.
Yeah. And a lot of people are saying they like the Mind Blower structure better than the Interdimensional Cable structure. That surprised me. I was not expecting this reaction from a lot of fans. Brit, you have this last. So do you think that you didn't like this as much as the Interdimensional Cable structure?
It's not so much the structure. I could take it or leave it.
Okay.
So much as the content. Most of the Mind Blowers I didn't really consider to be very funny or very interesting. There were a couple of gags, like the alien that he thinks he's torturing. That was funny. Summer's last little bit at the end was funny, but the rest of the episode was just kind of blah. And
yeah,
I wasn't captivated. I didn't think it was very funny.
Okay.
It had some slapstick humor, which I think other people enjoy in the show, but it's one of the things that I'm kind of like.
Okay, so not connecting with the humor.
That's how I feel about it.
The burp was how you feel about it? Yeah, Andy. So generally agree on that. Why? So you had it last year. Why do you have it last?
This is one of those episodes I was talking about that has one of those glaring flaws, and that flaw is that it's just not that funny. There's the true level joke, which is probably one of the funnier gags of the show it's ever done, but it's just the rest of it's just kind of eh. I do like the idea that they get all the writers get a chance to try their chops at doing little stories, but it just didn't land for me, these jokes, and I don't think that's a problem with the structure. I think that's just they just didn't have great 2-minute stories to tell in this case, and it was just not funny, and that's just why it's last here. It's boring, not funny, and kind of pointless.
Yeah, I think the stories didn't support
we
the
agree
structure.
on something.
Oh yeah, we'll see how much that happens. But yeah, and I should say that April and Michelle had this at 6th on their list. They were actually the highest on this. I'm focusing on the people on this podcast, but we pulled all of the co-hosts on this their episode rankings. Yeah, I agree with Andy. You just didn't find it that funny or engaging. I've given my opinion on this. Most people disagree. I have the second from the bottom overall on Rick and Morty. Right now, I don't know. I guess that's a hot take, but yeah. I think Andy and my list are very similar. I think I'm just going to be co-signing what Andy says a lot. My theory is that Andy's listened to me too much on podcasts, so he just has my opinions now. But we've been.
Or did he have his opinions before, and you just keep giving them to him because you enjoy them?
Or it's just that Dylan yells at me so much. It's just I just
you're into submission now, in my opinions. I think that might be the case. Okay, let's go to also in our bottom tier. Number 8 is the finale, the Rick and Morty date.
What?
Yeah. So lowest on this episode was Delaney, last place on her rankings. Michelle second to last. Alex also second to last. Me and John had it 8th on our lists. Brit and Carlton were higher at 6th, and April was the highest out of all of us at 4th place on her list. So definitely some variation on this episode. No one here on this podcast had it last. However, Andy, you seemed to be the least forgiving as your second to worst episode of the season.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've
discussed it recently, but the brief version.
The brief version is this episode has the worst 5 minutes of any Rick and Morty episode ever, and it's just horrible. The ending of this episode is just absolutely horrendous, and I've already given my opinion on how bad the Beth getting back with Jerry stuff was done, but just all that together means this is really bad. You can listen to the other podcast I was on the panel, and I think we talked about this a lot, about how this wasn't really good, for me at least.
Are we sure that?
I'm glad we agree.
Britt, you had it much higher, but we'll get to you in a second. Are we sure that there wasn't?
It's not so much that the last 5 minutes being bad is what I meant by I agree.
Okay, yeah. So it's
and some this episode I placed higher because I disliked other episodes more.
Okay, hot take. So it's not that you liked it a lot more; it's just that you disliked others. Interesting.
Yeah, and I liked the first part of the episode.
I just don't get that. This episode is almost my 10th Like if Morty's mind, like I fought about whether Morty's Mind Blowers was 9th or 10th with this one for a long time.
Okay, Carlton, you have it at 6th. So what's Andy not seeing here?
Yeah, so I've got a few factors going in for this one. You know, there's a bit of the sympathy piece. You know, they had to finalify an episode that wasn't going to be the finale, and so I really appreciate that they tried to knock out some things before we finish the season. I really enjoyed the banter and the buildup of Morty's character in that huge moment with the Morty versus the president in a verbal argument. But I also did. I think I divert a little bit here. I didn't hate the last 5 minutes. I think it's something very interesting we get to see because we get to see Rick's true fall because, you know, he's spent this entire season being the greatest and now he's basically lost to Jerry. And so it's different in season 1 where, you know, Rick was just there and there was the family structure, but now people are going to look more to Beth and Jerry as opposed to constantly looking up to Rick. And I think that was the bigger theme of this whole season.
Yeah, that's the most interesting take I've seen. Like, as I didn't hate the last 5 minutes. I've heard this a few times that people focus on the like this is the fall of Rick, and like it makes sense with the rest of the season. I think that's super interesting. It's something that's like hard for me to even like conceptualize when I'm just watching and seeing just these things that piss me off so much with Jerry and Beth and Jerry. Rick's arc barely even registers in my mind, but I do think it's like a great approach, and it totally might be what they're thinking when they approach these last 5 minutes. So yeah, I've seen this. I think the fandom in general is not as low as maybe me, Delaney and Michelle expressed on that recap podcast on this finale. John, your brief take on this. You had it 8th.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fandom was really sour. I noticed on that episode just because it was kind of a disappointing ending to the season. But when you look at some of the key elements, like as was mentioned earlier, like this is the fall of Rick, and that's the big thing. You know, Jerry is back, and there's no threat of Rick leaving the house anymore, like there was at the beginning of season 3 and really in the beginning of season 1. You know, Beth and Jerry are together. Like, there is some criticism. It may have been a bit sloppy. We still don't know if Beth's a clone or not. And obviously, yeah, we've had this debate a long time, so I'm not going to try to revisit it. But you notice as an end, it really wasn't a bad end. Like, yeah, Morty is more self-confident. Rick's now on the bottom. Jerry's on top, which, okay, there you go. First time Jerry's ever on top. It gives you something to look into into season 4. And yes, I mentioned that because I know Brit had her
Brit's
fanfic.
Yeah, Brit's still shipping it. Yeah.
Please tell me the fanfic.
No. Jerry's not in it.
Oh darn!
It's
Jerry's
the president and Rick.
Right, but it is like, yeah, it was a weak episode for sure. You could tell it was rushed, so maybe I did lower my expectations a little bit, but as an ending and sort of had that culminating effect, it did succeed, at least in that point. It just wasn't a strong episode, but at least it felt like a season finale, and it still wants me to keep going into season 4 because I want to see this new dynamic.
Yeah, I don't think I really place any emphasis on it like seeming like a finale. I think I would have just rather have them had a normal episode, and it's like, oh well, we just cut off, we ran out of time, we'll deal with the next season. That would have been more successful.
I would have preferred that as well.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do appreciate making it like a finale. But I will say the one thing I want to emphasize with that finale, I made my opinions clear. I'm not a fan, but I do think the first half of it is very funny. So that's why it's 8th and not like 9th or 10th for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's totally understandable.
Yeah. So last of our bottom tier at number 7 on our ranks is the Whirly Durly Conspiracy.
Not surprised.
Yeah. So we had again some variation among rankers here. April had this last. Me and John had the second to last. Brit and Andy had this 8th on their list. Carlton way up there at 4th on his list. Wow. Was the highest among.
Just cracked my top 5.
Yeah. So you're up first on this one. Why is this a top 5 episode of the season?
I don't know. There are a lot of interesting gags and a lot of things they could really play with in this episode, and that entire wormhole sequence was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But you know, they had Clancy Brown guest starring as Risotto Groupon. They had some great moments between Rick and Jerry, even, you know, Rick going so far as to basically tell Jerry what his problem is, which we've spent kind of 3 seasons figuring out, well, why do we hate Jerry? Why do we dislike Jerry? Rick just spells it out and kind of puts words into the thoughts we didn't have. The immortality field was something that I really appreciated in that little hotel sequence and that entire, brother-sister running around gag. And then ideally one of the show's darkest moments was having the brother kill the sister accidentally. And so I just really appreciate this episode.
That was very dark.
Yeah, it really furthered, Rick and Jerry's relationship. You see a little bit of Jerry growth, and even though he's like the least favorite character, it's always good to give some growth to some central characters.
Okay. And again, I feel like I'm saying this a lot, but despite the fact that I and other people may have been sour on this episode on the podcast, I do think this is a favorite of a lot of fans. So I like representing that opinion here. John, you have this as your 9th ranked?
Yeah, I did, because it was very I really didn't want to have it that low, because I was actually a really fan of that episode. It was really fascinating to watch, because I was so happy that Jerry got his own back. He actually was contemplating killing Rick, and there was some growth to him. He was standing up for himself. It got spoiled later on, because I felt like it just got wasted when we had that whole arc about that he can't break up with his alien girlfriend. I forgot her name, but it was Kiara. There we go. He couldn't break up with Kiara. So I felt like it was going somewhere, and I remember enjoying it, rooting for Jerry. And I think the fact it got spoiled later on, I was just, oh man, it's just wasted. But I still remember it being a decent episode. It just got pushed lower for me in the rankings, just because, I don't know, I started souring it more and more and more. So that's why I had it at second to last. I guess it was just war of attrition by that point.
Yeah, I do think this episode plays a lot worse in the context of the full season, so I can understand that. Although I'm not the biggest fan of punishing episodes for later in the season, but yeah, they don't really do anything with the development with Jerry here. Brit or Andy, quick thoughts here on Whirly Dirly Conspiracy?
I really liked it when I first watched it, because I really liked the monologue scene of why do we hate Jerry? Because I have been very frustrated with Jerry, having just finished watching the entire show. But the more I watched it, the more I realized that other than that monologue and that sort of part of the episode, there wasn't much to it. So I didn't rank it as high as I had initially cared about it.
Okay. And Andy?
I had kind of similar opinions. The field was really cool. I thought it was a cool idea. Jerry was okay in this episode, which is probably the best he's ever been. And the wormhole scene, I liked that. I liked that. I liked the wormhole scene. I think it was interesting, at least.
Yeah. I can see that wormhole scene. I could see varying opinion a lot, just because it's such a non-standard scene. For me, I didn't connect with it. Not the biggest fan of this episode in general, but
it's art for art's sake.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So some variation on that, but that is the Whirly Dirly at 7, the last of our low tier. We kind of have a middle tier here, 2 episodes that ended up tied for 5th on our list. So let's get into the first of those 5th place ties now, which is Rick Mansing the Stone. Comes in right in the middle on our list. This episode had an incredible amount of variability in our rankings, by far the highest standard deviation, which means that people were ranking it high and low. On this very podcast, we have someone who ranked it first and someone who ranked it last. So
wow,
let's this is Brit's number one episode. This is Brit's number 1 episode of the season and Carlton's number 10 episode of the season.
Wow.
We also had Michelle. Not just Brit, though.
I literally watched this episode today to make sure I made the right decision. I was like, yep, this is my favorite.
We also had Michelle at 2nd on her list, so it's not just Brit. Brit, yeah, why do you love this episode?
Because it's a good episode. It's really fun. I really like the atmosphere that they picked for the children to take off their rage and emotions of their parents getting a divorce, and you see them have emotional growth. I even thought the arm thing was funny, and usually gag jokes like that, I'm like, bleh. But this one was funny. We got to see Summer become a character. She had her own plot. The dude with the mustache and the helmet, jockstrap made of leather, and all this dumb outfits. And Rick was like, we got to get this element thing, and it was both had classic elements of a Rick and Morty episode, and also went off and was very creative in its own direction, and it was just great. It was funny. I like fun.
It was just great. It was funny, says Brit. Now let's get the other side.
It was very creative. It was very creative as well. But it had all the things that I like.
Universal praise from Brit. It's perfect. So Carlton, why do you hate it so much?
So much. It's the one. It's just forgettable for me. And I've come in to like watching halfway through it. In some points, I just have to change the channel. It's like the one episode that I cannot watch all the way through because I just can't. I either can't get into it, or maybe it's because I dislike the Mad Max movies so much.
Ooh.
Because it's not like my type of movie.
Can we get into that?
Of, like, setting.
That's a hot take. We're gonna get into that now.
I mean, I love the message of it. I just don't like the apocalyptic wasteland aspect. But for me, this just. I mean, I just can't remember. I mean, I can remember parts of it, but I just wasn't impressed at all.
Not
like as a follow-up to the Rick Shank redemption that we got. I expected a little bit stronger of an episode.
Yeah, I think a lot of people had that reaction. They're expecting more after that explosive first episode of the season. Yeah, and then the rest of us are basically in the middle here. Andy and John have it at fifth for the season. I have it at sixth. I guess I'm more towards Carlton because I don't understand the absurd love for it, but I definitely don't think it's a bottom tier episode. I don't know. I think it's solid, but I don't really get ranking this one, so I don't know. Andy?
I'm of a similar opinion. This episode was funny. I mean, it like anything above like I think 7 for me was just like it's a good episode. It's gonna be a fun watch. But I mean, this wasn't like incredible, and it didn't have a lot. It had a little bit of depth in like where we explored Morty and Summer's reaction to the divorce, but it was kind of minimal if I describe it that way. But it was funny, which is really good.
Yeah, John?
I liked it. It was funny. It was also the first recap podcast I won, so I have a sentimental attachment to it. So, I loved how they were able to make an entire character out of just an arm. That was so clever. And yeah, I love the Mad Max references. They were pretty funny. I liked how it was the first step towards like walking through dealing with a divorce. You saw Summer just come out and just be an awesome like apocalyptic warrior. Yeah, just apocalyptic warrior princess. That was so cool. And you know what? It was just it had a lot of great imagery, great scenery. Morty got to let it out, which was fantastic. So yeah, it was a good episode. It just, why was it not higher for me? We just had so many more better episodes that I didn't want to drop it any further than I did though, because it really did deserve to be not in the bottom half.
Yeah, this is a good episode, but there's a lot of good episodes basically. For me, anything above the bottom 3, I just really like. So I don't care a ton that this is people have this ranked really high. It's a great episode. Any episode with Armathy cannot be last. That is my take. This
is also the episode, Dylan, where you first yelled at me because I called Armathy a gag, not a character.
Yeah. So, looking back, you probably did not deserve that lashing out. I think you did far worse later in the season. So
wow.
Yeah. Okay. No, we don't need to bring the panel element into this. This is not a serious non-panel podcast. Okay. The other one we had tied for 5th on our rankings is the ABCs of Beth. I was highest on this episode out of everyone. I have it 3rd. Lowest was April and Alex at 8th, and then everyone else is somewhere in the middle. Brit closest to me, Carlton lowest out of all of us, but Andy and John also had it 1 slot above him. So everyone's generally in the middle with this one. I guess I'll give the defense. I've just always been very high on it. I think that I just really love the concept of the A plot. I think it was executed very well. I think the episode's very funny. I don't super connect with like the speeches with Beth and Rick, but I really appreciate them, especially in light of the finale. And just a really solid episode for me with specific elements that I thought were particularly stand out. Carlton, what's your take on ABC's of Beth?
I mean, I liked it. I did like it fine. It just wasn't. I just couldn't get past the B plot. Really did not enjoy the B plot. I think everything up to Beth's rampage, I really enjoyed. And then that whole speech when she's confronting Rick and, Rick's taking ownership, like bad dad all the way here. I really appreciated those speeches and those character moments because we got to see a little bit more of that relationship. But overall, it just kind of felt all over the place a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, and we talked about this episode recently. Quick thoughts, Britt?
I mean, I really liked the Beth plot. It was creative. I liked seeing that one, but the B plot was just flat.
Yeah. Andy?
I'm a little higher on the B plot than other people. It had some pretty funny lines, like Summer's beta feminist or whatever thing speech to Jerry, and Jerry's like, "Won't you help me?" And she's like, "We just did," and they leave. Like, there's some funny bits. That
was a pretty good moment.
Yeah, like there are. So I think the B plot is lower than the A plot, but
reason I like Summer so much.
Yeah, Summer's great, but I think this episode's funny. It's not the best of the season, but it's still funny, and I still like it, and I'd watch it if it was on TV.
I'd watch it if it was on TV. Andy, high praise, 2017. Wow.
Still, there's some episodes of the season that I wouldn't watch again.
Like, get out of here with that. You'd watch Morty. I'd watch Morty Mind Blowers.
No, I wouldn't.
If you agree with me that every Rick and Morty episode is good, then you'd watch it on TV, right?
Maybe I'm lower on Morty's Mind Blowers than you then, because I don't think I'd watch Morty's Mind Blowers.
I think that's like not a great episode, but that's a pleasant watch if you're flipping. Like, I'm fine with that. Anyway,
I guess.
John, quick thoughts.
Great episode. Thomas Middleditch sold characters, and even the Jerry scene with Kiara, where he has the cojones to break up with his girlfriend without putting his children in harm's way. That's sort of what soured on Jerry for me, because you learn he's still just a total and complete loser. And yeah, it was funny just because he was a loser. It's funny that Rick still defends Jerry, like he will kill aliens coming out to get him. So, but I just liked it. It was such a great look into Beth's character, and it was enjoyable. I really liked it.
Yeah. Thomas Middleditch in this episode might be my pick for best guest starring of the season. I thought he was so good as that character.
And you know what it is? It's like you could almost imagine, like in that recording studio, they probably had to give him just the whole room for him to like physically act out.
Probably physically acting out. Yeah, I agree.
To get that enunciation in, which for me is just great, because that means he was really. He wasn't just there to collect a paycheck and just say, "Hi, I'm in this episode." He was like into it.
No, yeah, and no, he's very funny, and I'm not surprised he really killed that character. So, okay, ABC's a bet there in the middle for us, and we've arrived at our top tier of episodes. There's a little bit of separation here for our top 4. So let's get into that. Number 4 for us is Pickle Rick.
Pickle Rick. Pickle Rick.
Andy, highest on this episode at 2nd on his list. Brit, lowest at 7th. Everyone else somewhere in the middle, including a lot of 4th places with me and John, Carlton 5th. So, I think we all generally agree this is a good episode. But Andy, what's the take for it being a great episode?
I think, first off, I think that I understand why some people don't like the violent parts with Rick beating people up, but I actually really loved all the violence. I thought it was pretty funny, even when he was just beating up rats and stuff. But I can see where people don't like that. But because I liked those action scenes, that paired with the really incredible B plot with the therapist makes this just an incredible episode. And I think this is the episode I get most where there's some separation, because I get that people don't like gore like that. I get that people don't like this kind of going nowhere thing with him beating up rats and beating up Russians, but there's some really funny stuff even in that plot, like with the laser powered battery cannon and like the Russian compound and the British. Who was the actor playing the British guy in charge of the compound? I forget his name.
Serafinowicz, yeah.
Yeah, he was really funny. Yeah. He was, and oh man, the whole sequence once we get Jaguar is really great too. That whole thing is really great, and then of course there's the poop eating and stuff, and oh, I love it. I love all of it.
Yeah, and I should note Delaney also had this at 2nd on her list. But
the teacher,
good.
Yeah. I think you have that 2nd because you got promoted to the recap podcast for that one. But yeah, that's my take. Yeah, we all generally had this very high. I think it's a great episode. John, Carlton.
Yeah, definitely. It was a great episode. Again, Pickle Rick is going to always get a laugh. This is going to be one of those episodes you're going to put up on the shelf and you're going to bring down every so often to tell friends why Rick and Morty is the greatest show ever. But But the interactions, both the B plot with him, getting all those extra limbs and fighting the rats and breaking into the compound and murdering everybody as a pickle was great. And then you just had the scene with the therapist, where basically you could tell he's trying to get out of it, but it winds up being a case of the therapist gets Rick. It's the first time someone, I think, actually was able to confront Rick and just sort of like get what he was about. Which you could tell is sort of a bit of foreshadowing toward the end. Now that everyone else in the family now sort of knows Rick, knows how to deal with him, and can sort of keep him in check. But that was the first real scene where Rick's vulnerability was kind of laid out, but not in an aggressive way, not like outright challenging him, but just seeing how that vulnerability is his own intelligence is going to kill him in the end was the message. And when you have those two just blend so well together, it was a funny, well-written treat.
A funny, well-written treat, John, 2017. Yeah, Carlton.
And now I want to pickle.
Now you want to, a pickle treat. Yeah, Carlton.
I still don't want a pickle, but I do agree with what he said.
Pickles are awesome. Pickles are horrible.
Yeah, let's go around the horn on if you like pickles or not now. But yeah, good episode.
Cucumbers for days. I loved it. I love that entire B sequence because we get that Rick is a genius, but we've never really seen him in a situation where he has little to no control over what's about to happen to him. So seeing him roll out onto the street, almost die, end up in the sewer, almost die, and then have this Iron Man-esque transformation sequence and just kind of make the best out of everything. Really cool to watch, just see the genius at work. I really did like having Susan Sarandon as the therapist and having her basically just read Rick to his face. And we kind of get to see the beginnings of that Beth-Rick reconciliation moment starting when they go out to get drinks while, unfortunately, Summer and Morty are still left untherapized.
Yeah.
You want to go back to therapy.
Yeah, not go back to therapy, yeah. So good takes there. I like the audible reaction to when you mentioned cucumbers. Apparently some strong feelings on cucumbers from our panelists here. But Britt, you have it 7th. I assume you're not that low on the episode, but your brief thoughts?
It was, like I said, I really liked the therapy. Let's go psychoanalyze things. But like the rat scenes and basically any scene where Rick is a pickle, but not in the therapy room, I was kind of like, nah.
You didn't even like the Russian compound?
No.
Hot takes. Okay. Yeah, I really like.
It wasn't terrible, but I was like, this.
Yeah. You just weren't that high.
It doesn't add anything to the series. It's just
what, Rick being a pickle didn't like advance his development for you, like as his character arc. No? Okay.
Wasn't even all that fun.
I thought it was fun.
Like, if they were going to do this, they could have, like, I don't know.
I will say, a lot of people aren't...
Had it pay off in some way to the greater series.
Yeah.
They could have a single one of those characters came back. He could have fought Evil Morty as a pickle, and I would have been more interested.
Morty as a pickle? Oh, that's the season 4 episode, yeah.
Evil Morty.
Oh, Evil Morty.
Rick is a pickle.
Evil Morty is a pickle?
Evil Morty is not a pickle.
No? Okay. Yeah. I was going to say Jaguar comes back, but no, that's just in the stinger, so... yeah, I will...
I would like Jaguar to come back, but he...
No, that would ruin the joke at this
so
point.
Far
but yeah, I will always defend Jaguar in the compound scenes. I'll agree. Great stuff. Okay, let's move on to our number 3. Very close between our numbers 3 and 2, so basically a tie for second, just 1 point separating it. But coming in at number 3 is Rest and Rick's Laxation.
Yeah.
Okay. We ranked very highly by some of us, including John, first place on John's list, second place on my list, and then third on Carlton, Andy's, April's, close behind for others. Britt had it at 5th place, so we're all generally very high on this episode. John, best episode of season 3?
By the skin of its teeth, it beat out my number 2 episode, which I'm just going to take a stab in the dark at the number 1. I won't say what it is, but I have a feeling it's that what it's going to be. But just the thing, as far as a character episode, it's the best that this show has ever done. It's also one of the best character episodes of animation I've seen in a long time. It's basically Rick and Morty minus Rick and Morty. You take all the supposedly bad stuff, which we learn is the bad stuff that they identified themselves, split it from their body, and what do we get? We get a sort of passive, it's not a great word, but, a passive, pleasant Rick who's intelligent, but he's not an asshole. And then you have Morty, who's just got Jordan Belfort levels of confidence, which was so entertaining just because of how un-Morty-like he was. He's selling stocks in a boardroom. He's got a great girlfriend. Has no fear of talking to women. He basically gets himself 2 women in the space of an episode, and he blows one of them off, and then he comes back and realizes what happened later. But it was just so interesting to see how those 2 characters think of themselves. Because we would see them as we see them as one thing. How do they see themselves? What do they see as their problems? Morty saw it as his timidity. Rick saw it as his care for Morty, and also his more jackassy behaviors. You saw what happens when that's let loose. And you get this whole sense of and you really drives home the point where they both need both halves of their personalities. Rick needs to have his sort of more passive, docile self to keep his evil, super genius self under control. And without Morty sort of taking a step back, considering other people's emotions, and really sort of, thinking through certain things, not panicking or not panicking, he just becomes an almost a laughably insufferable, although brimming with confidence guy. So that was why it was my favorite episode. It was funny, it was revealing, it was interesting, it was a clever piece of writing. That's why I had to put it at the top.
Yeah. I co-sign most of that. I fucking love this episode. So, second, one of my top 25 TV episodes of the year. Really, really good. Echo a lot of that. We'd a good length review from John there. Anything to add from the rest of the panel?
I think that there's also to say that I think this is the best episode of the season that combines comedy with character progression. Because there's some episodes here, like Pickle Rick, I think has some character progression, but it kind of stops the comedy. But this episode, we get some really interesting introspections into the characters while keeping it really, really funny. And that's a really hard thing to do, and I really like it in this episode. What was it? Toxic Rick and Morty are just both really funny characters, but I like to think about that. That's a really interesting way to do this type of mirrored evil characters here, and I really like it in this situation.
Yeah.
I just like how dark this episode is, and how dark some of the humor is, and just how enraged Rick is, the dark side of Rick is, and he's running around and he's just fuck everything. And I'm like, yes, you do you.
Yeah, you do you.
And then the one-off character, what is her name? He's like, say your safe word, and then she lets
Sea cucumber.
Yeah.
Sea cucumber.
Yeah, she's a top 10 minor character this season, definitely.
She's incredible.
Oh yeah.
One of the quiet jokes, he's just like, should I stay or should I go? He's like, you do whatever you want, babe, and she just goes, I'll stay. I'm like, wow,
She's
okay.
into it, yeah.
It's like she's into Morty. All right, go Morty.
So weird.
Into healthy Morty, yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really love Rest and Relaxation. A lot of praise on this podcast this season. Let's move on to our number 2 of season 3. A lot of people will be happy it got this high. Is the Rick Shank Redemption, the first episode of the season. Everyone at least decently high on this. Me and Delaney the lowest at 5th on our list, so that's that's where it bottoms out. No one had it first though. Carlton and April and Alex highest at 2nd. So Carlton, your highest. Why don't you give the why the Rick Shank Redemption is so great?
I mean, they to use a pop culture term, they pulled a Beyonce and just kind of dropped this on us.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that this is the episode we got dropped on. It picks up right after season 2, so you can tell there's some overarching plot development. You get to see a lot of great moments happening. You get the stinger where you get to see Phoenix Person, and you get
Phoenix
to see
Person.
We never saw
I feel like there's a better name we could have given him, but that's fine.
No, Phoenix Person is perfect.
How dare you? But yeah, continue.
But you get to see just the start of Morty's progression of, okay, I'm almost over all of Rick's antics. We're kind of done here, and you get to see the Beth and the Jerry dynamic change almost in an instant, because they have that moment where, like, you know what, I really just want to focus on you and our marriage, and then Rick walks back through and it's done. And it really just sets up a lot of elements and beats that we get throughout the season. So I really love this episode. I love the Shonies and the cult following created with the McDonald's situation.
No, not getting into that. Nope. No. Not talking about that one. But yeah,
it was like honey mustard. It was like honey mustard or something.
Not talking about that.
It was Cool Ranch.
Yeah, not getting into that. But not touching that one. It's okay. Yeah. So loving Rick Shank Redemption. Yeah, we talked a lot about it. Just great episode. Any further thoughts from anyone?
I think this episode is a little overrated.
Yeah, you still had a fourth, so
No, but it can still be overrated if it's high on my list. People like really thought this was like the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, I agree it's slightly overrated, but I feel like we're like splitting hairs. Like we think it's great. It's just not the not.
Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
I generally agree with you, but I think we're all very high on this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk our number one. Unsurprisingly, far and away our number one episode of the season is the Rick Lantis mix-up / Tales from the Citadel. Everyone had this ranked either first or second on their lists.
Wow.
Yeah. Only John, Brit, and that's it had this ranked second. Everyone else's number one episode of the season. I've sang this episode's praises a lot on the podcast. I've called it one of the best TV episodes of the year. Still standing by that. I think it's still probably the best animation episode of the year heading into mid-October. I doubt it will be dethroned. Just one of the best episodes of the show, definitely. Number two for my show rankings right now, but can't say enough about Rick Lantis mix-up. John, you don't have it at number one, but is that saying anything?
It's saying that I gave it a 97 out of 100, and Weston Rick's Relaxation got a 98 out of 100.
Yeah, which is fair to me, because that episode's great. So I'm in on that. Britt, what about you? You didn't have it number one, but you still like it?
I didn't like some of the Morty schoolboy plots as much. Like the scene where they're at the portal, the giant one.
The wishing well,
was kind of a throwaway. Yeah. Whereas I didn't think Recommending the Stone had quite a. I don't think it really had any throwaways that were quite that throwaway.
Yeah, do think the wishing well and the kid stuff was the weakest part, but I think
the rest of the episode was quite strong, and I did very much enjoy it.
There are weaker parts than the other one, but we don't need to get into that.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah.
Carlton, you're number one. Thoughts on it?
This is the first time probably television has actually surprised me, because we get the preview and the lead up for it, and we're expecting this huge underwater adventure, and then all of a sudden you get that shift after the title, and then you're just wondering, well, what's happening? And then all of a sudden, Evil Morty shows up, and you're like, oh. That's why it's called the mix-up. And you just spend the entire time ingrained in the Citadel plot. And for a second, I was like, I wonder how these adventures in Atlantis are going. Are we going to switch over there and then switch back? And the entire time, I was just proved wrong. We just got a whole Citadel-centric episode, and it was some of the best storytelling of the season, and probably, compared to some of the other animation, best of the animation that I've seen this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think I have this at number 2 of the series overall. Briefly, Carlton, where does it rank among the series-wide episodes for you?
Easily in my top 5, definitely probably my number 2 or my number 1, depending on the day.
Depending on the day, yeah, I feel that. Andy, what about you?
Similar to Carlton, it's 2 or 1 depending on the day. This is just an amazing episode of television. It's super funny. It's super interesting. It was really surprising when it first came on, and it's really interesting to me that this is almost like a better version of what they did in Morty's Mind Blowers. It's like a bunch of tiny little stories all at the same time, but it just is done so much better in this episode, and I
Works
love it
so
so
well.
much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's different concepts. These are words. Yeah,
But it's short. Never mind.
It does better with like the vignettes. Yeah. But
it worked with the vignettes because it worked in the context of the new society that's being built,
right.
and you just have, and it's just so, it's a Justin Roiland showcase, and from a political perspective, it actually got to be very interesting because in the new Citadel, Mortys are now empowered, which is such an interesting idea that Ricks are allowing Mortys to have rights for a change.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept, executed almost, if not perfectly. Just phenomenal. We'll be talking about this one for a while. So these are our rankings. Let's go through it again. Number 1, Rick Atlantis Mix-Up. Number 2, Rick Shank Redemption. Number 3, Rest and Rick's Relaxation. 4, Pickle Rick. Tie for 5th, ABC's of Beth and Rick Mancing the Stone. 7th, Whirly Durly Conspiracy. 8th, Rick More to Date. 9, Morty's Mind Blowers. 10, Vindicators 3, The Return of Worldender. Overall, I am content with these rankings. What do you guys think?
I'm most upset with Vindicators 3, but
that's my biggest issue. But it's fine. Overall, these are good rankings.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I still don't want to see your Pog collection.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Okay. Yeah. Noted. So let us.
Oh, also,
yes.
I also found it really interesting. We didn't even mention the B plot of Whirly Durly Conspiracy. Like, we didn't even touch on it. That's how forgettable it was.
Yeah, don't remember.
There was a B plot in Whirly Durly Conspiracy.
It was one with the giant people.
The enlarged summer.
The giant summer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I actually liked that.
There's some defense of that on this podcast. So,
yeah.
It was all right. It just, that was, the whole focus was that it was Rick and Jerry. That was
Rick and Jerry episode. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so let us know what your rankings were. Leave it in the comments on our website, overlyanimated.com. If you're listening on YouTube, you can leave it there. These are the consensus rankings, so you can't just say one of us is wrong. That's we're all wrong. We're all going down together on this ship. So there you go. Let's close this out by going around the horn and get now that we ranked the episodes. How does this crop of episodes stack up to previous seasons, episodes? So not necessarily like the season as a whole, but now that you saw the specific rankings and you went through them, yours, does it stand up? Does it compare well to seasons 1 and 2? Carlton, let's get your take on this first.
I think it does. I think season 1 was kind of their testing season, really seeing what works. In season 2, we got to see a bit more of the build and the story and the lore aspect of it. And season 3 is just kind of that perfect balance almost of lore, plot building, while also having those funny one-off adventures. So I definitely think it holds up. It might be tied with season 2 as my top season, if not right under season 2.
Nice. Okay. John, what about you?
It holds up for me. For me, those top 3 episodes might be the top 3 episodes in the whole show. So it holds up really well. This season was just when you have like 7 out of 10 episodes that are just really, really good. You made an amazing season. Like most cases, it's like if you get get just half, you've done well. They did an amazing job this season. It was just really wonderful to see this show this year. It was really great.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree with that. Just wonderful to podcast about this show all season. Yeah, Brit, holds up well compared to seasons 1 and 2?
Of course. I loved it the most.
The most. Number 1 season for you? Nice. Okay. Andy?
Yep, it's my favorite season of the show. Like John said, there's just so many good episodes in the season. It's hard to not call this the best season of the show.
Yeah, I think it's barely better than season 2. I think they're close. If they did a really strong finale, I think it would have been a clear number 1. But given the finale,
season 2 it did have a very strong finale.
Right,
that's true.
Yeah, so that's the argument for season 2. It works better as a whole. It ended stronger. I think if you're looking at it from a sum of its parts angle, I think that season 3 might be the best season. So, we're all either on it being up there or if not the best season. Let us know what you think of that as well. Again, I think some places you will not hear that opinion stated, so I think they're wrong. So, and clearly the show's great. I don't know what else to say there. So, give us your feedback on this. That's all for this. Let us know anything about the seasons or episode rankings. Find us at overlyanimated.com. And leave comments there. Make sure you subscribe to us so you don't miss future Rick and Morty off-season podcasts. Have some plans for the next one. We'll see. And that'll be out either next week or the week after. So I'm going to try to keep going with these Rick and Morty off seasons for a little bit. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Consider supporting us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thank you very much to all of our patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, John, aka Johnny Bravo, and thanks as always to our patron executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Alex, and Andy. If you want to give us your take in quote unquote in person, like in virtual person on text chat, you can do so at Discord, overlyanimated.com/Discord for our invite link. I just recently posted in the, I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but I recently posted the YouTube video to the Rick and Morty porn parody trailer on our.
Oh my god! Why'd you bring this up, Dylan?
Brit, what did you
Entertainment
do?
Weekly had an article like, "Here's the trailer for the Rick and Morty porn parody." I'm like, why? That's not content. You can't just post that as an article on your entertainment site. But it's kind of a fun.
Brit, did you have a hand in this?
It's kind of a funny. Brit's not making the. It's not involved in the porn parody. I don't know who is making this, but it obviously seems tacky. But there's a lot of references to the show in it, so you can just check that out. I don't know. We don't need to plug that, but that's the type of quality content you can find at our Discord, and of course check out overlyanimated.com for all of our animated shows coming up. Voltron Legendary Defender, which I do think Rick and Morty fans might like, and Ruby is starting up again too, which Rick and Morty fans might like that too. I can see that. So those are our upcoming shows. Check out all that at overlyanimated.com. Thank you guys very much for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
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 Take care.